The main reason that I and many other people use Arch Linux is the AUR. If all I cared about was a lightweight and bare bones distro, there are tons and tons of other examples out there, but none of them have the AUR. And I saw this post a little while ago that might sound really dumb, but it's a completely legitimate question. The way it's phrased isn't great, but why don't the AUR developers just release the AUR universally as something like the LUR, the Linux user repo? As in, why isn't the AUR a universal package repo like, say, Flatpaks, for example, where I can install the Flatpak for OBS on Arch Linux, I can install it on Ubuntu, I can install it on Fedora, I can install it on Gentoo, and basically anything else out there, and it pretty much just works, and it works pretty much the same way, no matter where I install it. Why isn't the same true about the Arch user repository? Now, the AUR doesn't have the same problem that taking, say, a Debian package would, where the Debian package format is different from the Arch format, and different from the Fedora format, different from a bunch of other formats out there. You can convert it, but out of the box they are going to be different. With the AUR, every single package isn't really a package. It is something known as a package build, a build script to generate the package. And most of this build script is fairly generic. So we have a lot of metadata, for example, the package name, the license, a description of the package, and most of the stuff you see in here is kind of generic. So we're using, say, Go tools, for example, or we're seeding into certain locations, or maybe we're exporting certain variables. And the way we install stuff is the way that stuff is being installed in the background for pretty much every other package manager, using the install command. And looking at a package build from a fairly high level, it seems to be mostly distro independent. You're not seeing any Arch-specific commands like running Pacman, for example, but it's not designed to be distro independent, and there are going to be some edge cases where it only works on Arch. For example, let's say with the install command. So install is basically a shorthand for changing the permissions of a file and moving it into a location. It can do other things, but that's what you'll mostly see when it comes to a package build. And the paths being used in here are usually going to be the same paths on a lot of other distros out there. But some distros store their binaries in a slightly different location. Maybe it's not in /user/bin. Maybe they have a slightly different folder structure when it comes to storing documentation, for example. And when it comes to any packages messing with Grub, Grub is well known for having a bunch of different locations where files can be stored. But things like the metadata can be mostly dealt with. Different distros might want to name things a little bit differently, but if you wrote a parsing tool to get out the package name, your package version, the license, the package description, your dependencies, make dependencies, and architecture supported, things like that, all of that you can pretty much deal with. Now, the package may not support the architecture supported on your specific distro. Maybe you're running an xe6 distro or an ARM distro or things like that, but that's pretty easy to deal with if you write an automated parsing tool. One thing you wouldn't be able to do is use any of the existing tools made for installing an AUR package on Arch. So every single AUR helper in the background is just running one program. That program is called make package. Make package basically takes that AUR package and then converts it into an Arch package and sticks it in Pacman so you can go and uninstall it and things like that. This would not work at all with anything else. It is specifically designed around using Pacman. If any other distro wanted to use the AUR, they would need to write their own build tool. You would need a Debian tool that packages it for apt. You would need a Fedora tool that packages it for yum and DNF. You would need a Gentoo tool that packages it for emerge, and all of the other things out there. And this just isn't something that the Arch or the AUR devs would ever be interested in doing, because they are working on Arch Linux, and that's just what they are focused on. They probably wouldn't try to stop you if you wanted to go and make it yourself, but they wouldn't go and help you. But making an automated tool to generate a package isn't that big of a deal. The much bigger problem is once you've actually generated that package. And this is a problem that even shows up on distros that are based on Arch Linux, like say Manjaro, where they use Pacman, you can use the AUR, and the repos are based on the Arch repos, but they're not actually just using the core Arch repos. The packages on the AUR are designed around the packages and the package versions available on Arch. So let's take something like OBS Studio-Git. This is going to go and compile OBS from source. And this has a bunch of dependencies, and one of those is Jack, for example. So right now, Jack is version 0.126.0-4, and the version of OBS available here is tested against that version. And OBS being a rolling release, this isn't always the case, but in many cases has fairly up-to-date packages. But what about a distro like Debian, like Ubuntu, like Fedora, like OpenSUSE, or any other distro out there? The versions of packages, they might be up-to-date in some places, but they might also be out of date. Like Ubuntu is a good example of this. If you're running a LTS Ubuntu, the purpose of running an LTS is that it's a stable system that isn't constantly changing out packages. So if you wanted to go and compile OBS Studio-Git, which is the latest version of OBS, it might not work as you would expect because the dependencies that are available might not be up to date with what is being compiled here. And maybe for this specific package, everything would be consistent. Or maybe it's just within that range where things will still function. But can you guarantee that for every single package on the AUR, it's always going to have an equivalent dependency on whatever distro you're using? The answer is absolutely not, because you can't guarantee that on something like Manjaro. So Manjaro has this entire section of their forum dedicated to the things not being compilable on Manjaro, or things just breaking when they try to compile it and things like that. If Manjaro, which is a modified version of the Arch core repos, can't handle it, there is no shot that something like Ubuntu could handle it. Now, package versions are one thing. Package names and package availability, that is a much more complex problem to solve. So there is no guarantee that every single package in the Arch repos is going to be named the same way on every other distro. Let's just take Ubuntu, for example. So for core things like glibc, zsh, I don't know, bash, whatever else you want to pick, it's probably going to be exactly the same. But there are some cases where you have two projects with the exact same name, and if you want to package both of them, you have to solve that conflict somehow. And, different distros are going to have different ways to address this. Then you have to map all of those package changes into the package names available in your distro. But the other problem is the contents of those packages. So you might have a project that is really, really modular, and one distro might decide, I'm going to ship all of these modules in the exact same package. But then Arch might come along and say, I'm going to ship the basic core and then all of the modules as separate packages. If you want to use those modules, then you go and install them separately. But without knowing this is the way these programs are packaged, you can't just easily map things together. So you need to have basically a complete understanding of the entire Arch Linux repos before you can even begin this mapping process. Let alone the problem that you might find out that certain packages are just straight up missing. So unless you want to start adding more packages into your core repos, that one you're not really going to be fixing. And how about this? What about the distros out there that ship different forks of a project? Usually in the repo, it's just listed as the same name, and maybe for most of the functionality, it's pretty much the same. But there's a reason why it's the fork there and not the original version of the application. You could absolutely make a tool that will take a package build from the AUR, turn it into a package for whatever distro you're using, and then install that as a regular package. And Some of the time, a lot of the time, it's going to work. But there's going to be a lot of packages that frankly do not function for any number of the reasons I've listed earlier. If what you care about is an actual cross-platform repo, it needs to be done in a very specific way, separating it from your regular packages. Whether we're talking about Flatpaks, Snaps, the Nix package manager, or language package managers like, say, pip, gem, npm, and anything else out there, while they all work very differently under the hood, they all share a very similar trait. They install stuff separately from your distro package manager to make sure that it doesn't break stuff. And in a lot of those cases listed, they don't even use your system libraries. They bring in their own to make sure it's not being affected by whatever else you have installed on your system. And doing it like this eliminates most of the overlap possible. It doesn't fix everything, because you can still have binary names overlapping. But this is a problem for devs to fix themselves, and to search for the project name before they start writing a project. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think it's possible to make a generic tool for installing projects from the AUR? I would certainly love to know. And if you've done it, that I would definitely like to know about. So if you like this video, I'm going to go and like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, go check out my Patreon, subscribe, selling Barrow Pay, linked in the description down below. I've got a podcast called Tech Over Tea. I've got a gaming channel called Brodie Robertson Plays. That's going to be it for me, and I'm out.